Previously, being well trained was described as a characteristic of the accomplishment of samatha. A fully tamed mind is the mark of samatha. The accomplishment of Vipassana is also a state of being completely trained. At times, one may be able to meditate well, but later lose clarity, become dull, or lose the wish to meditate. When one becomes well trained, the mind naturally engages in Vipassana, which brings clarity and understanding. Therefore, until one has attained the suppleness of being well trained, one has not achieved true Vipassana. The text says that the nature of this Vipassana and the way it arises has already been explained in the section on samatha. In terms of the Abhidharma, one can say that being well trained is a mental event, mental factor. Hence, all beings possess it all the time. What differs among beings is the degree to which it is present. Some beings naturally engage in negative actions, while some naturally engage in wholesome actions. However, since we haven't been meditating from beginningless time, we are not well trained in meditation. We don't have this natural tendency, so we need to habituate ourselves to it, as we did for samatha practice. The well-trained Vipassana will develop gradually. Being well-trained means that, through long-term training, something becomes natural. To tame a wild horse, the trainer rides it every day. Gradually, it becomes docile. If it doesn't follow instructions, the trainer disciplines it and then gives it something to eat, the carrot and stick approach. We tame our minds in the same way. What should we tame? We should tame our own minds, not others. There is no need to tame others, nor is there any way to do so. They can only be transformed through virtuous influence. We use samatha and vipassana to tame our minds. We cannot rely solely on samatha, as it can only temporarily suppress the mind. To truly tame it, vipassana is needed. Only the union of samatha and vipassana can fully tame the mind. This is called complete taming. Once the mind is tamed, it becomes obedient. Spiritual practice involves this process. First, tame the wild mind. Only after it is tamed does it gradually become at ease. So, we need to habituate ourselves to it as we did for samatha practice. The well-trained vipassana will develop gradually. Vipassana practice also develops gradually. The well-trained vipassana will gradually develop, beginning with very little and increasing over time. Samadhi, understanding, mindfulness, and awareness are all mental events, mental factors that are naturally present but must be increased. Therefore, we first cultivate samatha meditation and then develop vipassana. The development of the well-trained vipassana is described in the explanation of the View Sutra, which says that there are two kinds of realization. The first is the realization of the entire multiplicity of phenomena, which means an understanding of the relative aspects of phenomena, such as impermanence, the 5 aggregates, and the 12 links of dependent origination. To develop this, we need a perfectly trained mind. The first type is understanding at the relative level, which is incomplete. When we try to understand the mind, we come to see that all phenomena are manifestations of the mind. We begin with a coarse, relative understanding and gradually realize their true nature. The second is the realization of the true nature of phenomena. To attain this realization, one also needs a perfectly trained mind. Without a completely trained mind, one will not attain these two realizations or genuine Vipassana. Thus, the development of a perfectly trained mind is the sign of the accomplishment of Vipassana. After achieving Vipassana, the mind becomes completely obedient, free from afflictions and self-grasping, and no longer acts wildly. This is the state of being completely trained. To summarize, in the state of being well trained, one can practice Vipassana meditation without any mental or physical difficulty. It is pleasant and easy to do. This is the sign of the accomplishment of Vipassana. The state of being well trained is what Confucianism describes as being able to use one's own mind freely, as the mind has become very obedient. The translator uses the term well trained, and this perspective can also give us some inspiration. We usually say that when meditating, the mind can enter concentration and gain realization. Actually, taming is only an initial stage. Have you seen the Chan painting Taming the Ox? A cowboy first searches for the ox. Then he finds the ox's horns and later its whole body. After that, he begins to tame the ox. Gradually, the ox becomes obedient. Later, he rides on the ox's back, even walking backwards. Later, he arrives home. Further on, the ox disappears, and then the cowboy disappears too. This set of paintings depicts a process. First, one must tame the ox. A great Chan master in Chinese Buddhism composed Taming the Ox, which I once browsed. The 10 paintings depict the process and stages of spiritual practice. Although the Chan tradition seems not to emphasize stages, once someone attains enlightenment, they begin to describe them. After realization, they have experience and can explain the progression. Regarding enlightenment, there are no stages to speak of because one never knows when it will occur. It depends on causes, conditions, and timing. However, spiritual practice has stages. Taming the Ox depicts these stages, and each painting has a 4-line verse that illustrates one stage. However, as you practice, you may become attached to the stages. Therefore, the teacher instructs you not to cling to them. Following stages without clinging to them is not easy. Those who study the Dharma progressively may become attached to the stages. When they see people with sharp spiritual faculties move ahead rapidly, they may think, "That's not acceptable." People with sharp faculties can progress quickly, yet they still follow the stages. They are not skipping them, they simply learn faster. For example, they may complete in 1 year what ordinary practitioners take 2 years to learn. It is like the students who entered the University of Science and Technology of China at age 14. They also followed the stages, but advanced more quickly. Seeing others learn quickly, you might object, thinking they are not following the stages. In fact, they are. Therefore, we should follow the stages without clinging to them and avoid blind faith. Nowadays, there are many common issues among Chinese Buddhists, such as superstition. Some people practice blindly on their own without a teacher. Some are celebrity chasers, which I have often criticized. This is a serious problem. Just as worldly people have different tendencies, some are obsessed with movie stars, some disdain everyone. Both are extremes. Celebrity chasing is a serious issue, so it is essential to learn how to rely on a qualified teacher. One should not follow a teacher like a celebrity chaser, that is, with blind faith. Otherwise, they might encounter big problems. If the followers were not superstitious, there would be no fake lamas. Fake lamas are produced by their followers. They don't become so on their own. These impostors are fostered by Han Chinese followers. Did you know? In Tibet, everyone knows who has genuine enlightenment. False teachers and lamas are produced by their Han Chinese followers. To rely on a teacher, one should study carefully with them and observe them. A guide to the Great Perfection preliminary practices explains clearly. First, observe the teacher. Then rely on them and learn from them. Only then can faith arise. A few great masters are universally acknowledged, so observation may not be necessary. However, usually we don't have the opportunity to rely on them. If you have immense merit, you might be able to follow them, learn from them, and receive their direct guidance. Guidance is essential. If the teacher doesn't instruct you, how can you practice? Even if they have high spiritual accomplishments and you have great faith, if they don't teach you, it is of no use. We need teachers to guide us on what to study. If you don't study, how can you understand the teachings such as awareness and tranquility? Not to mention Vipassana. Even in samatha practice, there are countless forks along the way. If you cannot distinguish clearly, how will you know where you are abiding? When you truly advance in practice, you will realize that without a teacher, you cannot practice at all. As meditative stability arises, many states will appear, and you might panic. Without a teacher, would you dare to continue practicing? Moreover, how would you conduct deeper insight meditation? We have been studying the essentials for purifying the mind here. Even for the meditation on non-self alone, we have practiced for several years, and gradually you begin to grasp it a little. Every day I guide you to study and meditate, and slowly you learn how to contemplate and apply the correct mental mode. If a teacher doesn't instruct you, it is pointless. You might feel there is a blessing, but what kind of blessing is that? It may involve learning a little of the exoteric teachings and having faith in the teacher. The only benefit is that you may not be separated from the teacher in future lives, and the teacher might guide you to a Pureland. perhaps having some effect in that regard. However, achieving enlightenment in this very life is impossible. You can only wait until the time of death for your teacher to guide you to a Buddha field. Other attainments are not possible because you haven't received guidance from them. Cultivating faith is certainly good. What I teach are antidotes, which are very useful. There is no need to impart deeper, ultimate teachings here. Currently, many students are still outsiders. What use is it to share teachings meant for insiders with them? They haven't even entered the door, let alone the hall, and much less the chamber. The antidotes I teach are useful. We must follow the stages. If one already grasps them, there is no need to repeat them. I remember teacher Nan Huai Chin saying something like, "If you already grasp it, it's like a pile of dog shit. If you haven't grasped it, even gold cannot exchange it." That's roughly the meaning. The language the book uses is not very common, but it can still enlighten us. While the expressions may seem unprofessional, if you understand them, you can gain some insight. Samatha and Vipassana are both used to tame the mind. We usually say tame the mind, but this book uses the term well-trained. Over countless kalpas, the mind has accumulated countless karmic habits. As a result, it has become very wild, and we need to tame it with samatha and vipassana. Samatha makes the mind still, and vipassana allows us to know the nature of the mind and all phenomena. As the mind grasps at appearances, it becomes deluded, going against the truth. In this degenerate age, whether in the Tibetan or Chinese regions, many people are not capable of practicing samatha and vipassana. They merely cultivate a little bodhicitta and recite prayers to seek rebirth in Pureland. I notice that their prayers often focus on aspiring to be reborn in a Pure Land or some views of the great perfection. Cultivating such views is beneficial for rebirth in a Pure Land. Since beings in this degenerate age may have learned Dzogchen views in past lives, sharing some of these insights with them can satisfy their craving. That is why I also expound on these topics. As you know, Guru Yuanyin and many other great masters often teach emptiness, including the ultimate wisdom of emptiness, to strengthen students' faith. Meanwhile, they guide students to aspire for rebirth in the Western Pure Land. Beings in this degenerate age can only be guided in this manner. If asked to practice meditation, enter deep concentration, or progressively practice the teachings like the generation and completion stages, they cannot, as they don't have the patience and cannot endure the hardship. So, the great masters teach them the highest view, simple and most direct, for the ultimate truth is supremely simple, and they listen joyfully. Then the masters tell them, generate bodhicitta, and eventually you will have the chance to reach the Pure Land of ultimate bliss, or Guru Rinpoche's Buddha field. This is how great masters guide beings in this degenerate age, and we follow in their footsteps. Most teachers guide beings primarily in this way. Nevertheless, I also instruct you to cultivate the wisdom of non-self, as your self-grasping is too deeply ingrained. Therefore, I urge you to practice methods that eradicate self-grasping and then generate bodhicitta. After bodhicitta arises, you may practice the great perfection. This is the typical path. It is essential to eliminate self-grasping. Otherwise, you might misapply advanced teachings, which would be problematic.